The United States is home to some of the most developed metropolitan areas in the world, yet not all cities have followed the same trajectory of growth and prosperity. A number of American cities have faced long-term economic decline, shrinking populations, and deteriorating infrastructure. These challenges often result from a combination of deindustrialization, political mismanagement, demographic shifts, and structural unemployment. This video examines 10 U.S. cities experiencing long-term decline or systemic crisis. The list is not based on temporary hardships, but rather on sustained trends that indicate a deep structural collapse. Each case is presented using factual indicators such as economic output, population change, public service failure, and fiscal health. Detroit, Michigan. Detroit is often cited as the most iconic example of urban collapse in the United States. Once a symbol of American industrial strength, it was the global center of automobile manufacturing throughout the 20th century. The city's population peaked at nearly 2 million in the 1950s, but has since fallen to under 630,000. A combination of factory closures, racial segregation, and suburban flight contributed to the decline. The city filed for bankruptcy in 2013, marking the largest municipal bankruptcy in U.S. history. Since then, select areas have seen partial revitalization, but most neighborhoods continue to face blight, high crime rates, and failing public services. Detroit's school system has struggled with both performance and funding. Despite isolated investment in its downtown core, many residents remain disconnected from the city's limited recovery. St. Louis, Missouri. St. Louis has experienced a consistent population decline since the 1950s. Its population has dropped from over 850,000 to under 300,000 residents. Deindustrialization, racial division, and suburbanization have all contributed to the city's challenges. Vacant properties and abandoned buildings are common in many neighborhoods. Public safety remains a concern, with violent crime rates regularly ranking among the highest in the nation. The city's police force and justice system have also faced criticism and federal scrutiny. Infrastructure maintenance, school quality, and public health indicators show persistent underperformance. While nearby suburbs have retained economic activity, the urban core remains underfunded and increasingly disconnected from regional development. The long-term effects of redlining and highway construction continue to shape the socio-economic layout of the area.
3. Baltimore, Maryland. Baltimore has suffered from decades of industrial decline, particularly in shipping, steel, and manufacturing. The city's population has decreased significantly from its mid-century peak. The local economy has failed to replace lost industrial jobs with stable alternatives, resulting in high poverty levels and persistent unemployment. The public school system has faced years of underfunding and administrative turnover. Infrastructure issues, such as leaking water systems and aging housing stock, are widespread. Public trust in law enforcement remains low following high-profile incidents and systemic misconduct. Although the city contains notable institutions such as Johns Hopkins University and the Port of Baltimore, many surrounding neighborhoods remain in crisis. Economic inequality and racial segregation continue to define much of the city's urban experience. 4. Cleveland, Ohio. Cleveland is another city deeply affected by deindustrialization. Once a major manufacturing hub, it has experienced substantial job loss since the 1970s. The population has declined by more than half over the last 70 years. Many neighborhoods suffer from abandonment, crumbling infrastructure, and underperforming schools. The city's financial health has been unstable, requiring external state oversight at various points in its history. Lead contamination in housing and water systems has also been a significant public health concern. Cleveland has tried to reinvent itself through healthcare and education sectors, including institutions like the Cleveland Clinic and Case Western University. However, these developments have not fully addressed the structural divide between prosperous districts and the many areas still in decline. 5. Jackson, Mississippi. Jackson has become emblematic of municipal failure in the Deep South. With a declining population now below 150,000, the city faces serious infrastructure issues, including recurring water system breakdowns. In recent years, large portions of the city were left without clean drinking water for extended periods due to failure at treatment plants and aging distribution systems. Public schools have experienced declining enrollment, low performance scores, and state takeovers. High crime rates and low economic mobility have further impacted quality of life. Jackson's tax base continues to shrink while demands on essential services have increased. Political conflict between the city government and the state has exacerbated the crisis. Disagreements over funding, jurisdiction, and policy implementation have hindered coordinated responses to public needs. As a result, Jackson remains locked in a cycle of fiscal strain and public dissatisfaction.
6. Gary, Indiana. Gary is one of the most extreme cases of industrial collapse in the United States. Established as a company town for U.S. Steel in the early 20th century, it thrived during the peak of American steel production. However, the collapse of domestic steel manufacturing in the 1970s and 1980s led to massive job losses and population flight. From a peak of over 170,000 residents, the population has fallen below 70,000. Entire neighborhoods lie vacant, with hundreds of abandoned homes and commercial properties. Public services have diminished significantly. Many schools have closed, and basic infrastructure has fallen into disrepair. Despite occasional federal assistance and private investment efforts, the city continues to struggle with widespread poverty, limited access to services, and low economic output. Gary's decline has remained largely unchecked, reinforcing its position as one of the most visibly collapsed urban centers in the country. 7. Birmingham, Alabama. Birmingham was once a thriving industrial city known for iron and steel production. During the 20th century, it grew rapidly, becoming the economic center of Alabama. However, like many manufacturing cities, it suffered from automation, foreign competition, and economic shifts toward the service sector. The city's population has declined significantly since the 1960s, while surrounding suburbs have grown. Many central neighborhoods remain underdeveloped, with persistent poverty and aging infrastructure. Racial and economic divisions are deeply rooted, and school segregation continues to shape educational outcomes. Birmingham has attempted redevelopment through healthcare and technology sectors, but gains have been unevenly distributed. The downtown area has seen some revitalization, yet much of the city remains outside the scope of economic renewal. Long-term problems such as underfunded public transportation and unstable housing markets remain unresolved. 8. Flint, Michigan. Flint gained national attention in 2014 when lead-contaminated water exposed residents to a major public health crisis. However, the city's problems began decades earlier, with the decline of the local auto industry and the departure of General Motors manufacturing plants. Unemployment surged, and the population fell sharply from a mid-century peak of nearly 200,000 to just under 80,000 today. Abandoned homes and empty commercial buildings dominate many neighborhoods. Public trust in government institutions remains low after the water crisis and years of political instability. Despite ongoing remediation efforts, Flint continues to face challenges in economic development, education, and public safety. The water infrastructure has been partially upgraded, but confidence in public services remains weak. The city's long-term collapse is not simply the result of environmental failure, but a broader breakdown in governance, planning, and economic resilience.
Number 9. Stockton, California. Stockton represents a case of financial collapse in a region with significant economic potential. Located in California's Central Valley, the city grew rapidly in the early 2000s but was severely affected by the 2008 housing crisis. Massive foreclosures, falling property values, and reduced tax revenues forced the city into bankruptcy in 2012. Although Stockton has emerged from bankruptcy, its recovery remains fragile. Many public services were cut during the financial crisis and have not been fully restored. The city still faces high crime rates, limited affordable housing, and uneven school performance.
Stockton's geographic location offers long-term opportunity, but the city continues to face structural risks tied to overdevelopment, water supply issues, and debt burdens. The legacy of financial mismanagement continues to impact city planning and public confidence.
10. New Orleans, Louisiana. New Orleans has faced multiple shocks over the past 2 decades, the most significant being Hurricane Katrina in 2005. The storm led to widespread destruction of housing, infrastructure, and public institutions. The failure of the levee system and the slow federal response revealed vulnerabilities not only in engineering, but also in governance and urban planning. While parts of the city have recovered and even gentrified, others remain severely underdeveloped. Public housing projects were demolished, and many low-income residents never returned. Crime rates remain high, and the school system has undergone complete restructuring with mixed results. Environmental risks such as flooding and sea level rise continue to threaten the long-term viability of certain neighborhoods. The city's economy depends heavily on tourism and services, making it vulnerable to external shocks. Although the cultural significance of New Orleans remains strong, its physical and institutional infrastructure continues to bear the burden of past failures and future uncertainty. These 10 cities represent a cross-section of American urban collapse. While each has its own history and challenges, they share certain structural patterns. Industrial decline, demographic shifts, environmental risks, and governance failures have compounded over time. In most cases, revitalization efforts have been isolated or uneven, benefiting select districts while leaving large areas behind. The persistence of economic segregation, failing infrastructure, and declining public trust suggests that recovery will require more than isolated investments or short-term programs. Understanding these cities is not merely a reflection on past mistakes, but a necessary step in shaping policies that prevent similar outcomes elsewhere. The lessons embedded in these urban histories are critical for planners, policymakers, and communities seeking long-term stability.